The British Crown never fully surrendered its power. It just buried the paperwork deep enough that most people forgot it existed. And some of that buried law is still enforced today, against ordinary citizens, in ordinary courts, for offenses most of them don't even know they can commit. Monarchies across the world like to present themselves as ceremonial, decorative, harmless figureheads who wave from balconies and cut ribbons at hospitals. The paperwork says otherwise, and in at least 7 countries, that paperwork still carries the force of law over people who never agreed to it. Start with the swans. Under English law, every unmarked mute swan swimming in open water technically belongs to the reigning monarch, a right formalized under the Act of Swans in 1482. Killing or capturing one without royal permission was once a crime punishable by imprisonment, and the statute was never repealed, only softened over 5 centuries of quiet non-enforcement. Each July, Crown-appointed officials called Swan Uppers still row up the River Thames in scarlet uniforms, counting, marking, and formally asserting royal ownership over birds that have no idea they're property. The swans, for what it's worth, remain unimpressed. The role dates back further than the law itself. Since at least the 12th century, the English crown employed a king's swanherd specifically to manage the royal birds, and the position, now called the king's swan marker, still exists, still ceremonial, still drawing an actual salary from the crown estate. In practice, prosecutions for swan-related offenses are almost non-existent. The last serious case involved a man in Windsor in 2012, arrested not for killing a swan but for allegedly eating one. He was released without charge. The swan was not recovered. Medieval England drew the same line around the ocean. A statute known as the Prerogativa Regis, dated to 1324 under King Edward II, declared that any whale, sturgeon, dolphin, or porpoise washed onto English shores automatically became a royal fish, the personal property of the crown. Fishermen who hauled one in were legally required to report the catch, and in theory, still are. The law has never been struck from the books, only quietly deprioritized. In 2004, a fisherman off the coast of Wales caught a 9-foot sturgeon and, half-joking, offered it to Buckingham Palace. The palace, half-joking back, declined it and told him to sell it instead. Nobody wanted the fish. The law didn't care. Beneath the ocean's edge, the ground itself carried the same claim. In 1568, a legal case known as the Case of Mines settled a dispute between Queen Elizabeth I and a mining company, ruling that all gold and silver found anywhere in England and Wales belonged automatically to the crown, regardless of who owned the land above it. That 450-year-old ruling still shapes British mining law today. A company that strikes gold in Wales or Cornwall cannot simply extract it and sell it on the open market. It must first negotiate a license with the Crown Estate, the very body managing the monarch's commercial property portfolio. A prospector can own the hill. He will never own what's inside it. Modern Welsh gold, mined from the historic Clogau and Gwynfynedd seams, has been used in royal wedding rings for generations, including those of the late Queen Elizabeth II and Diana, Princess of Wales, sourced under crown licenses that trace their legal authority directly back to that 16th century ruling. The supply has nearly run out. What remains is rationed, tracked, and reserved almost exclusively for the family whose 16th century ancestor first claimed the right to it. The ring outlasts the mine. The mine was never really theirs to begin with. In Tonga, no citizen has ever legally owned the ground beneath their own house. Under the Land Act of 1927, every acre of Tongan soil belongs constitutionally to the crown, distributed to male subjects only as hereditary tax allotments, plots granted for life, inherited by sons, and never sold outright on the open market. The king personally allocates the country's largest estates, and to this day, a Tongan citizen wanting to build, farm, or pass property to a daughter must navigate a land code written a full century ago around a single royal signature. Roughly 1/3 of eligible men now receive no allotment at all. The land simply ran out first. The house can be yours. The dirt beneath it never was. Britain also still criminalizes imagining the monarch's death. The Treason Felony Act of 1848 makes it an offense to compass, imagine, invent, devise, or intend deposing the monarch or forcing a change to the line of succession. Language broad enough that, read literally, it could criminalize an opinion column. In 2003, a British newspaper editor named Alan Rusbridger challenged the law in court, after publishing articles arguing Britain should become a republic, forcing the High Court to formally rule that free speech protections under the Human Rights Act override the 1848 statute. The court agreed with him. It did not repeal the law. The act still exists, technically unenforceable, permanently loaded. No prosecutor has attempted to enforce the Treason Felony Act against a Republican since Rusbridger's case, and legal scholars generally regard it as functionally dead. Functionally dead is not the same as repealed. The statute remains printed in the official body of British law, available for any future government to revive, reinterpret, or selectively apply against a critic it finds inconvenient. A law doesn't need to be used to keep working. It only needs to still exist, move east, and the stakes stop being symbolic and start being decades in prison. Thailand's Lèse-Majesté Law, formerly Section 112 of its criminal code, makes it illegal to insult, defame, or threaten the king, queen, heir apparent, or regent, a legal protection rooted in centuries of absolute monarchy and rewritten into its current form in 1957. Conviction carries a sentence of 3 to 15 years per individual offense. And because each separate comment or social media post can be charged on its own, some defendants have received sentences stretching past a full human lifetime. In January 2021, a Thai activist named Anchan Prelert was sentenced to 87 years for sharing audio clips a court ruled critical of the monarchy, later halved to just over 29 years after she pled guilty. The king said nothing. The law said everything. By 2024, Thai human rights monitors had documented over 200 individuals facing active lèse-majesté charges, many of them university students charged for comments made during pro-democracy protests years earlier. Bail is frequently denied. Trials are often closed to the public, and sentences are handed down not for actions but for words. Words the accused, in several documented cases, insist were never intended as insults at all. Intent stopped mattering. The charge no longer requires it. Brunei's sultan governs with a pen most modern monarchs no longer have. In 2019, Sultan Hassan al-Bolkiah enacted a revised Sharia penal code across the entire nation, imposing death by stoning as the prescribed punishment for adultery and for consensual same-sex relations, alongside amputation for theft. Penalties issued not by parliament but by royal decree, under a monarchy that has ruled Brunei continuously since 1967. International backlash was immediate. Companies boycotted Bolkiah's hotel chain, and within weeks the Sultan announced an extended moratorium on capital punishment. The underlying law was never repealed. It sits on the books today, fully intact, simply unenforced for now. The moratorium is not a legal protection. It is a royal preference, revocable by the same authority that created it, with no parliamentary vote required to end it, and no court position to override the decision either way. Brunei's constitution grants Bolkiah near total executive, legislative, and religious authority simultaneously, a concentration of power most Western nations abandoned centuries ago. The law didn't disappear. It's simply waiting for the Sultan to change his mind. Eswatini, formerly Swaziland, remains Africa's last absolute monarchy, governed by decree rather than debate. King Mswati III has ruled since 1986 under a 1973 royal proclamation that banned political parties outright, a ban his government has upheld for over 5 decades despite repeated pro-democracy protests. Citizens vote for individual parliamentary representatives, but no political party may legally campaign, organize, or field candidates, and the king retains the constitutional authority to appoint the prime minister and dissolve parliament at will. In 2021, pro-democracy demonstrations were met with a security crackdown that human rights groups estimated left dozens dead. The parties remain banned. The proclamation remains law. Japan enforces its royal bloodline with a quieter, colder kind of exclusion. The Imperial household law, first written in 1889 and rewritten after World War II in 1947, restricts the chrysanthemum throne exclusively to male descendants in the male line, permanently barring women, even direct daughters of the reigning emperor, from ever ascending it. As of 2026, that restriction has pushed Japan's own imperial family toward a demographic dead end. The current generation includes only a single male heir, young enough to eventually inherit the throne, after his father, Crown Prince Akishino. Parliament has debated reform for well over a decade. Nothing has passed. The bloodline is shrinking. The law refuses to bend. Princess Aiko, the only child of the reigning Emperor Naruhito, remains constitutionally barred from ever ruling the country her father governs, despite consistent public polling showing a majority of Japanese citizens support allowing female succession. Under current law, when Prince Hisahito eventually becomes the last male heir standing, the 1100-year-old imperial line will rest on the health and choices of a single man. One name carries the whole institution. The law made sure of that. Britain's own monarchy still holds a private veto most citizens have never heard of, known as King's Consent, Queen's Consent. Under Elizabeth II, the practice requires government ministers to privately show the monarch, or the Prince of Wales, any parliamentary bill that might affect crown property, personal finances, or hereditary revenue before that bill can even proceed through debate. A 2021 investigation by The Guardian, drawing on previously unpublished Whitehall documents, found the procedure had shaped legislation on matters ranging from land law to road safety, all without public knowledge that a royal review had taken place at all. Buckingham Palace maintains the monarch acts only on ministerial advice and holds no genuine power to block a bill outright. The bill always eventually passes. What changed first, quietly, is rarely recorded. None of these laws survive because anyone still fears the crown. They survive because repealing old law takes more political effort than simply ignoring it. And monarchies, stripped of armies, stripped of absolute rule, discovered centuries ago that paperwork outlives power far more efficiently than soldiers ever could. A swan on the Thames, a sturgeon on a Welsh beach, a vein of gold under a Cornish hillside, an allotment of Tongan soil no daughter can inherit, an unenforceable treason statute, a sentence handed down in a Bangkok courtroom, a stoning law waiting in a filing cabinet in Bandar Seri Begawan, a banned political party in Eswatini, a single male heir carrying 11 centuries of Japanese succession law, a bill quietly shown to a prince before the public ever sees it. Each one is a fossil of a system that supposedly ended centuries ago. What makes these laws different from ordinary historical trivia is enforceability. A myth gets debunked and disappears. A repealed statute gets struck from the record and stops mattering. None of that has happened here. Every law named in this video remains, in some functioning legal sense, active, which means every fisherman, every miner, every journalist, every citizen born without the correct gender or the correct bloodline is still standing inside a boundary a monarch drew, in some cases, over 700 years ago. The crowns got smaller. The armies disappeared. The paperwork stayed exactly where it was filed. It didn't end. It just stopped announcing itself.